My name is Maria Kent Beers, and my co-host Rachel Martinez and I are pleased to present Remember Me. This podcast is dedicated to preserving the memories of those diagnosed with FTD. We hope this episode leaves you feeling more connected, provides a deeper understanding, and allows you to learn to accept the good. Always, always accept the good. This is Remember Me.
This is who I am, where I come from, still in my bones.
So today we are here with Keri. Today is a really special day because it is the first day of the FTD Hot Shot Challenge. And we're so excited to have the co-chair and creator of the beautiful Instagram of this challenge. Keri, can you tell us a little bit about the challenge and what we're asking people to do today?
Of course. So the FTD Hotshot Challenge campaign is a grassroots project working alongside the AFTD, the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration, to raise awareness about FTD in the community, as well as raise funds for the AFTD to support families and research as we continue to search for treatment and a cure. And we're really hoping this project goes viral and impacts as many people as possible, to just raise as much awareness as we can.
So there's some quick steps, very easy to participate. So can you tell people what they need to do to join the challenge?
Perfect. Yes. So FTD, film, tag, donate. So film yourself taking a shot of hot sauce and posting it to your social media account, wherever you are, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. So film yourself and use the hashtag FTD Hotshot Challenge. You can tag our Instagram or you can tag the AFTD's Instagram. Tag. So tag, we say a minimum of 5, but you can do more. So tag your friends and challenge them to do the same, to also post it. And then donate. So donate if you are able to the AFTD to help support the cause, support research, support families who are affected by FTD. So FTD, film, tag, donate.
Awesome. We encourage everyone to participate. I have a fun idea for how Rachel and I can do this together. I haven't shared that with you yet, Rachel, but
I did kind of a dry run, and I did it with Berman's, which is just whatever hot sauce I found at Aldi. It was awful. It was disgusting.
I could imagine.
So I don't know if I'll do that again. I don't know. My brother's a big fan of Louisiana. We've had a donation come in from Secret Aardvark hot sauce, so I might use theirs. We'll see. I'm not going to say.
Nice.
Cool.
Sponsors. Good work.
Secret Aardvark.
That's
I'm
amazing.
going to have to investigate that one.
Awesome. So, Keri, thank you for explaining everything about the challenge, and we hope that we get some good engagement on that. But the real reason that we have you here today is to hear the story of your journey with your father, Mark. I know it's been a long journey, and you've been really great about documenting it on your own site. But we'd love for you to maybe just kick off with telling us some of those first initial signs of, wait a minute, something's going on with Dad and something doesn't seem right.
Yeah, so with Dad, we probably noticed the earliest signs in his late 40s. Things like we would go over to somebody else's house and we would finish dinner and he would say, "Got any ice cream?" or "Got any pickles?" And my mom would just be horrified that he would be asking for additional food after they just fed us. In 2008, he kind of just announced to our family that we were moving across the country and that he was quitting his job and going to take a different job. And it was just little things like that that at the time didn't seem too out of the blue. Like it seemed a little out of character for him, but not enough to really raise really big red flags.
How old were you when he started showing just these kind of odd behaviors?
Like 15, 16.
Wow, so young.
So you were young.
And I'm the oldest of 3. So my brother is 6 years younger than I am, 6 years younger. So I think the hardest part for me thinking about our diagnosis journey is that the earliest warning signs of his disease hit at a time when it seemed like my dad was already struggling personally. I think when most families look back, they say, this is when FTD started to affect them, when we started to see the telltale signs of lack of empathy, personality changes, or whatever their first warning signs were. But for our family, I think we did see those telltale signs, but we can never be sure because of
Right.
when those signs appeared and how gradual his decline has been, how much of his behavior during those years were his choice because he was struggling with other issues, and how much were just early warning signs of the disease itself.
I think that's a really good point that you brought up, because I look back myself on some things with my mom, and it's hard to decipher, was that her quirky artist way, or was that the disease? And like you said, since it was such a long progression, and people have hard times in life too. People have big life events, and we have heard in several interviews, we thought they were having a midlife crisis. We thought, they were struggling because they lost their job. So I definitely think there are many people that would connect to what you just spoke of.
Yeah, and I think FTD is it really is so cruel, because with FTD, the best parts of who you are, your personality, your empathy, your ability to connect with others and have compassion for others, that part of your brain, especially in the behavioral variant, is what is eaten away. And you're left
Right.
with, my mom often said that my dad became a caricature of his worst features, where the good parts of him were slowly disappearing.
Take us back to moving across the country. So he's like, we're out of here, and you guys up and move.
And again, this is one of those things where we're not exactly sure if this was FTD or not, but he was having run-ins at work. He was disagreeing with his boss a lot. He was just really discontent with his work. And so he just decided we needed to change and we needed to move. And my mom supported him, but we all were kind of like, we don't really want to do that. But I don't know, maybe because some of the empathy was already starting to disappear. We go through things in life. Maybe he was just going through a hard time where work was particularly difficult and he wanted to get away from it. I don't know. But yeah, we ended up moving across the country, and we actually ended up moving back 2 years later because that didn't go well either. His new job that he took really went horribly. He was not kind to people. I think he thought it was kind of a grass is greener scenario, where he thought if we
Right.
move, everything will be better. It'll be a different place, new people. I'll get to be my own boss. He had a little bit more autonomy in the new job. And he thought that'll be fine. I won't have to, do what anybody else says. It'll be fine. And it was very much not fine. And so 2 years later, he actually went back to his boss and apologized for his behavior, and his boss was like, okay, well, we'll take you back, but here are all the things you're going to need to be willing to do if you want to work here again. And I was like, okay, sure, fine, it's fine, because at that point he was kind of facing unemployment and we didn't really have many options. So anyway, we moved back to my hometown of Lafayette when I was 17, and then around the time I was 18, 19 is when we're for sure looking back, I know, okay, things were starting to not really be right with him mentally.
Can you tell us at what point he started seeking medical attention?
Yeah, so as far as our path to diagnosis, for years, he had shown this slowly increasing symptoms concerning behaviors like memory loss, irrationality, growing lack of empathy and emotional control. By 2014, he had lost not only his longtime job as a pastor, but also a series of smaller part-time jobs as well in very quick succession. He would only hold a job for, a month or two before something would happen and he would be let go. So matters had escalated in our home to the point where we were not safe around him. So in desperation, my mom was finally able to convince him to go see a series of doctors. I mean, before they had tried counseling, they had tried going for marriage retreats, they had tried sending him on his own, on his own little retreat, and nothing was really working. we were just desperate to find out what is going on, because at that point it was like he had become a different person, and my mom would just say things like, "This is not the man I married." And so she finally told him, "Look, you have to go see a doctor. I know you don't think anything is wrong. I know you don't want to, but I'm not giving you a choice. You have to do this. And, prove me wrong. Go and prove me wrong, and if the doctor says you're fine, then that's fine." So after months of this pushing him, he finally agreed to go with her to go see a psychiatrist, his geriatric doctor, and to get a CT scan. So when you're trying to explain to someone who lacks empathy and has no idea that they're acting irregularly, that they really need to go seek medical attention, you understandably have a hard time.
Right.
So anyway, the geriatric doctor and the psychiatrist both agreed that a CT scan needed to be ordered. So the CT scan was ordered to check for physical issues because the doctors really couldn't find anything wrong with him at that point. It's an odd feeling, I think, to come to the point where you are hoping they find a tumor. I don't know if how many families are like, please let it be cancer, but that's kind of where we were. We were just desperate to know what was wrong.
That is like the most relatable thing I've ever heard. I literally was like, I hope they find something so I have an answer, because you don't want to believe that your mom, my mom, who I spoke to 100 times a day, just didn't want to like be my friend anymore.
Yeah.
Totally. I totally get that. Totally with you. Know that you're talking to two people that have, we know on some level, what you're going through.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right.
Back at it.
So
you got this.
When we got the scans back, the radiologist, the geriatric doctor, the psychiatrist, they all told us his brain is normal. He's fine. We don't know what's wrong. He must have bipolar. He must be having a midlife crisis. There's nothing wrong with him. Now, looking back at those scans now that we've seen a neurologist who's familiar with FTD, we know that his brain was very much not normal even then, but it wasn't caught. It was more subtle back then than it is now. So this is why I am so passionate about raising awareness for FTD, especially among the medical community. Though we encouraged him and urged him to receive help, he just became increasingly hostile and continued down a very destructive path that led to alienation from most of his family and friends. For the safety of my brothers who were still at home, and for her own physical safety, my mom really had no choice but to file for a divorce, and she was granted, restraining orders, protective orders. We tried to have a relationship with Dad as much as possible, but his behavior was really making that pretty impossible. So by 2018, things had really deteriorated further. So this was 4 years later. My brothers and I were seeing more and more just strange behavior from Dad. Things like only eating sweets. He only ever ate at McDonald's. He wouldn't change clothes for 5 or 6 days. So he was always wearing the same jeans, same Alabama sweatshirt. He was virtually homeless. He was living with, couch hopping with various friends. He refused to seek employment, citing his belief that his self-published book would make him a millionaire. And so he didn't really need a job because he was going to be famous. He stopped showering. He started keeping really bizarre sleeping and driving habits. Before we got diagnosis, but after all this began, I put a tracking app on his phone because he started getting lost. I mean, we'd lived in the same town pretty much since my parents got married in the 80s, and he would call me not knowing where he was. So I put the app on his phone, and I learned that he was spending hours at 2 or 3 in the morning just driving in circles around town, just driving in circles over and over. I started helping out with his mail, I started switching, contact information on his bills to my address, to my phone number, so that I could help him. And I discovered he was falling behind on bills. He had fallen for many costly and dangerous scams. it was not unusual for him to spend his days either sitting in McDonald's handing out checks and cash to strangers, or picking up hitchhikers and giving them large cash amounts and large checks.
That might be maybe the third time we've heard about hitchhikers in interviews.
So, all, these are all things that you look back on later and think, oh my word, this was FTD. It was totally FTD.
Right.
What were you thinking at this time? Like, what was this like for you?
It was simultaneously relieving and concerning. It was relief because it was like, okay, there's something more going on. He's not just mean. He's not just dangerous. He's not just violent. This has got to be an illness. This has to be something that is wrong. So there was a little bit of relief that came with that. But there was also, once I was aware of just how bad things were, when I got a hold of his financial documents, when I got a hold of his tracking data, finding out where he was going and what he was doing all day, there was also this intense pressure that came from that, where he just never left my mind. I mean, I had a 2-year-old and I had another one on the way. And I think listening to Michelle's episode actually was really helpful for me, hearing her talk about how it was like having 3 children, and my children didn't have a full mommy, still don't, honestly, because I just became so concerned with keeping him out of prison, honestly, and keeping him out of the ER, and checking my phone constantly to make sure that he hadn't, taken someone across state lines, or to make sure he wasn't in jail, or to make sure he wasn't stalking, at this point he had several restraining orders against him, making sure he wasn't going to those people's houses. It was an incredibly, incredibly stressful time once we realized just how bad things were, but we had no explanation and no diagnosis at that point. So we had no idea what to do.
So this is 2018.
This is 2018.
When did you finally receive the FTD diagnosis, and how did that play out?
So he randomly decided he was going to go visit his family in Alabama. So he just took off one day. He just showed up in Alabama at my aunt's doorstep, and she helped him find housing and help figure out where he was going to stay while he was there. But he really wanted to see his sister and his other sister. So one of his sisters, my Aunt Keri, is the one where he just showed up, but he wanted to go see my other aunt, who is in a memory care facility. So during that trip, it was a disaster. And after he left, my aunt called my brother, or messaged my brother, and said, hey, he's behaving a lot like our sister. And, he didn't shower the whole time he was here. He didn't change clothes. He actually got kicked out by the security at my aunt's facility because he was so belligerent, insisting there was nothing wrong with her and that they were keeping her against her will, and that he was going to take her out whether they liked it or not. And so my aunt told Caleb, something is really wrong, and I think he might have the same thing she does. And my aunt had, in 2016, she had behaviors for a long time, and they finally figured out in 2016, they had taken her to a neurologist that said she has FTD. And so when my Aunt Keri reached out to Caleb, she said, maybe it's the same thing. My husband had, in the months prior, we had been trying to figure out, what is going on? He is just acting so strange. And my husband works in the pharmaceutical industry. And so he was reading a medical magazine and came across an article about FTD. And he read off, I remember we were sitting in our bedroom and he read off the symptoms to me. And it was this eerie moment of, we've never heard of this, but this sounds like my father. And we've never heard any diagnosis that sounded anything like it before we heard the term FTD. There had been no medical diagnosis that made any sense before we heard the FTD symptoms read out loud. And then it was like something clicked where it was like, that has to be what he has. But that's so rare. Like they keep talking about, it's so rare. So it can't be that, right? And so we kind of put it out of our mind. until my aunt reached out to my brother after that trip and said, hey, something's wrong. I think he might have what Kathy has. And we just found out, last year before that Kathy has FTD. So
were you not made aware of that until after your dad's visit?
no, so it's kind of complicated, but my aunt was also in a car accident when she was 18 and had TBI. So
It was a complicated diagnosis.
The symptoms kind of overlapped, and it was complicated. Like, she's always been a little off, and she was getting way, way, way worse faster than it should have happened. So, and she had her own, and that's a whole nother story. They had their own journey of misdiagnosis and being told that it was nothing and that they needed to just calm down, so yeah, that's why I was unaware that she had FTD, is because, and we don't talk that much. We weren't exactly, super tight knit with them. So we didn't know about it until she told us in 2018, hey, your aunt was just diagnosed with this, and I think that's what he has.
Oh.
So.
And then what was your next step after that? Where'd you go?
That really is what gave us the ammunition and the courage that we needed to renew our efforts to get him seen by another doctor and to get another brain scan to check for atrophy. It's a lot easier going into the doctor saying, hey, we're pretty sure he has frontotemporal dementia. His sister has it too. He's acting strangely. We think maybe his dad had it as well. Can you confirm for us? That's a lot easier than going in and saying, versus he's acting strangely and we don't really know why.
Right.
So it was much easier once we had a name, to go in and find a doctor who would be willing to help us just confirm what we already suspected. That was a real turning point for us as far as finding a diagnosis. So.
And anyway, how did you feel?
At that point, we still didn't know for sure. So we were still, in trauma mode. We were still trying to keep him from hurting people, trying to keep him from hurting himself. We were just still, every day was a new adventure in keeping him safe. So many, many doctor's appointments, legal issues, financial issues later, many more doctor's appointments later, a referral to a specialist at IU Research Hospital here in Indianapolis, and another CT scan finally confirmed the diagnosis, confirmed our suspicions that he had significant brain atrophy consistent with FTD, and that, the atrophy was even visible in the 2014 scan as well. Confirming the CT scan with the neurologist, having a neurologist that was familiar with FTD, that recognized it instantaneously for what it was a real game changer for us as far as finding a diagnosis.
And did they tell you this is behavioral variant FTD? Did they have the knowledge to explain to you, what exactly it was?
Yes, we will forever be grateful that we were referred to IU Research. Dr. Brosh is our neurologist there, and he was just so phenomenal. He, sat down with us with Dad, and then had Dad pulled for some memory tests into a different room, and then talked to us as the family. At that point, it was me and my husband and my father-in-law was with us, because my brother lived in Chicago and he couldn't take time off work. So it ended up being just us in the room. But I really appreciated that he took us aside, away from my dad, especially because my dad, has this really strong anosognosia, not being aware of his altered behavior. The first couple of doctors that we went to did not do that. And those appointments were incredibly stressful, putting it mildly. Literally came to shouting matches in a couple of appointments because Dad was just so angry at being told that he was sick. But Dr. Brosh pulled us into the side room and said, hey, I've had a look at the CT scan. I've read through your summary that you gave, because ahead of time, before the appointment, I had sent him a 1-page summary that was just bullet pointed of the timeline. This happened in 2014. This happened in 2018. Here's the symptoms. Here's the reasons why we think it's FTD. And he said, I've read over what you've sent me. I've read over the images. He has FTD. there are 3 different kinds. There's a language variant, there's a behavioral variant, and there's a series of subvariants that include motor affectations. But he definitely has the behavioral. And I just remember sitting in his office and him and saying, "What now? So what do we do? What can we do? Now that we know what it is, what do we do?" And he just very kindly and quietly said, "I'm sorry, there's not much we can do." He said, "We can make sure he's taken care of. We'll take care of him. We're not going to leave you alone. You're not in this alone. But there is no treatment and there is no cure." And then I just burst into tears, because partially just out of relief that there was an explanation. There was an explanation after 10 years of wondering what is going on. We knew this was the diagnosis. But even with the diagnosis, that doesn't change the fact that he was terminally ill. But once we had a diagnosis, it was much easier to arrange for care, but it didn't bring my dad back. Nothing ever will.
Right.
And I think that day, sitting in Dr. Brosh's office, was the first time that I really started to process that he wasn't coming back.
The grief process begins.
Yes. I think until then it was just trauma mode,
Right. It's hard to put into words really what that experience is like, but I know you understand what I'm saying when you start to grieve the loss of someone who is alive. That's just a weird thing.
It is the most bizarre experience. So from that point on, now we knew what was wrong. We had a doctor's diagnosis, so I could get him set up on insurance. I could get him set up I started looking into, Indiana has this agency called SACOA, which is the Center for Aging. So I went to them. I reached out to different social workers, trying to get care arranged. But even during that time, those couple of months, he was diagnosed in January. So January 2019 was when the doctor said, he has to be supervised. So I started the process of looking for how are we going to do that? Right. And while I was looking for that, we started to see more concerning behaviors that were making it really obvious that this was a very urgent safety issue. The most traumatic of which was him showing up at my brother's house with a duffel bag to stay the weekend, which was part of the plan. My brother had said, "Hey, come up this weekend, you can help me paint my house," just to kind of keep him out of trouble, just keep an eye on, just to see if, we could keep him under control while we looked for a new living situation. And anyway, so they started working around the house, and my brother went to move Dad's duffel bag into the room where he was going to be staying, and it was incredibly heavy. And so he opened it, and inside were firearms and ammunition. That is what my dad had packed for the weekend. And we were just like, oh my word. We can't, because we had fought the doctor. We had said, he doesn't need 24 supervision. Listen to him. He sounds normal. People tell us all the time, he's not that sick. He sounds so normal. He sounds fine. But with those safety issues happening, it was clear that he did need the 24-hour supervision. So I called the doctor back and I said, okay, I'm on board now. What do we do?
Wow.
So yeah, it's a whole nother tangent that probably don't need to get into, but I ended up contacting the police, and they helped me remove the firearms. And so we got him stabilized in the short term, but I started looking. It was just clear from the way he was treating me. He was getting more belligerent. He was getting more violent, getting harder for us to convince him to stay safe and to keep other people safe. It just became clear that our, dream vision of moving him down to Indianapolis to live near us was not going to be safe for him or for us. Right. So I started looking into facilities, which just completely broke my heart. I mean, my dad is 57 years old. You know, what 20-something is looking for a long-term care option for their parent who's in their late 50s? You know, it was just so.
We're nodding. I know Rachel's nodding, even
Oh
though she's
gosh, I
wrong.
am like my neck hurts. I'm like, okay, girl, I hear you. Yes, it's awful.
And I didn't believe the neurologist when he told me he that we might need to start looking for facilities. I gave him such horrible pushback about it. And then a month later, I was calling him back and saying, okay, I'm on board now. I wish I wasn't, but I am. What do we do? Because he's gonna hurt himself, or he's gonna hurt somebody else. He's gonna end up in prison, and it's gonna be my fault because I didn't listen to you. So I'm ready to listen now. What do I do? And so his office helped connect me with some agencies and some facilities around Indianapolis that accepted Medicaid, because my dad had spent all of his life savings at that point, mostly by handing it out to strangers, honestly, and, you know, self-publishing his book that he thought was going to make him a millionaire. So he didn't have any money. So we had to start the process of getting him approved for Medicaid. I hired a lawyer to help me with that process. I filed for guardianship, and we were able to find a facility in Indianapolis that didn't turn him down on first description, which is what happened to me a lot of the time. I would start to say, you know, hey, I'm looking for a place for my dad. And they would say, well, how old is he? And I would say 57. They'd be like, oh, what's wrong with him? And I'd say, he has FTD. And they'd be like, what? And so I'd explain, you know, it's a brain disease. You know, I'd have to go through the whole thing with them, educate them on what FTD even was.
Right.
And as soon as I mentioned that he had the behavioral variant, I had so many places tell me, oh no, we're not equipped to handle that.
I hear this in support group all the time.
I can't even tell you how many facilities. I think it was in the 30s, honestly, of the number of facilities that I called just begging for some place to keep him safe. No, I'm not even asking for much. I don't need a 4-star hotel here. I just need
Right.
somebody to have eyes on him, to keep him from overdosing, to keep him from wandering the streets into traffic. Yeah, I was looking for bare minimums here, and I wasn't finding it. And I finally found a facility. We have, I believe, 3 facilities in Indianapolis that have men's only floors, which is what he needed. And we were able to find one such facility that accepted Medicaid, that did not turn him away after I described the severity of his symptoms and his belligerence. They weren't scared off by that. And, you know, the place smelled nice. It smelled clean. The nurses seemed cordial and willing to listen when I tried to educate them on what to expect from him. And so that was really our only option. So that's what we ended up doing. And he's now in that memory care facility on the men's only floor. And I visit him, you know, as often as, I guess not post, you know,
COVID.
post-COVID, post-pandemic, I haven't been able to, but before, you know, we were able to take him to church, able to take him to doctor's appointments. But to have his daily care, to know where he is, to know that he's safe, to know that he's not, you know, running over curbs or trying to drive or trying to take too much medicine, you know, all these things that I was so worried about when he was living on his own. I knew where he was. I knew he was safe. I knew he was eating. And that relief, I just can't even tell you how heart-wrenching that decision was to put him into facility, and how much I have wrestled with guilt and grief over that decision. But at the same time, what a level of relief it is just to know
Oh yeah.
that he's
I'm
cared for.
I'm like breathing a little bit better now. You're telling this part of the story.
Yeah.
Thank God that you were able to find that, and you're such an incredible daughter to, I can't even imagine what it took to get there. I mean, 30 place, and you have little ones and your own life as well. So kudos to you for just being incredible.
That feeling of having to find a place for a young and B, a man, is people look at you like, why are you doing that to your dad? You know, like that's the feeling I got. Like, you can't care for him. Like, he's a young, healthy, minus of course your brain deteriorating. That was some of the responses I got. No, 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 he should be at home. And I'm thinking like, no, I cannot physically care for him. And now he's in the later stages. He needs pureed food. He is incontinent. He is wheelchair bound. I physically cannot do anything for him except just be his daughter. And that's a really hard shift. And I know Katie Brandt talked about it in her episode. That's the only thing that I can do that nobody else can. So I find relief in that, in just being his girl and his advocate. But at night when I go to bed, of course, I'm like, he's in this facility by himself where he can't be touched and loved, but he's also cared for. He's showered, he's clean, he's, you know,
He's
like
safe.
you said, he's eating. Exactly. So it's amazing how these journeys all, I picture just like these meandering paths and they cross over. You know, I've experienced some of the things that Maria has, and she's experienced some of the things that you have, and they're so different, but they're so the same.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. When I listen to your podcasts, when I listen to the episodes with other people, that is exactly how I feel. I feel like, you know, that there are details that are different, but there's this common thread weaved through every FTD story, especially FTD stories told by the children that are just eerily similar, that just, you just feel this instant camaraderie of, I may not have gone through the exact same thing, but we all know that feeling of watching someone you love and someone who cared for you as a child, that now in your 20s, in your 30s, you are caring for them. And there's just kind of an instant camaraderie, I think, when I meet other FTD children.
Absolutely. It's so true what you're saying. It's just an instant connection of just understanding, just like all these deep feelings that you've never thought you were going to experience in your life, and meeting people who have gone through that as well. So I think it's really well said.
Well, kudos to you, Keri. That's a lot. That's a lot to take on while trying to learn how to be a mom, while making sure your mom's okay and your brother's okay and your dad's okay and you're okay. Like, there's so many layers to it, and it's so it's very delicate, I think. Like, you have to make sure every layer is just okay. And that's hard because your layer usually falls at the bottom.
Right.
And it is hard not to develop, you know, when you've gone through experiences like this, it's hard not to develop, you know, severe anxiety and panic attacks. And I'm actually in counseling right now to help me kind of just, I have space to breathe now. My daughter's a little older, dad is more stabilized, and I finally have time to kind of grieve and lament and kind of process everything that has happened. And it's really hard, I'm realizing, not to kind of develop this kind of savior complex after an experience like this, because you get into this mental mode of, I have to fix it. And if I don't do this, it's not going to happen. Because for a while that was true, you know? And so you get this idea of, I have to protect everyone around me from harm all the time. And it was getting to me to the point where I was also having some thyroid issues and maybe some postpartum depression as well. But all of that mixed together, I was an anxious mess. And I am so thankful that I had my husband who said, look, we've been through a lot, and it's okay to acknowledge that we've been through a lot the past couple of years, you know, really the past 10 years. And I will support you if you will go get some help. And I will be here. I will watch the kids. You go to counseling. You know, you do your counseling homework. I will take care of the kids. You don't have to protect me from this. You know, I love you. I'm not going anywhere. And having his support has just, it has meant the world to me to have a spouse and a partner who sees the ugliest, worst sides of who you are and of who your family is, and doesn't go running screaming for the hills. You know, that's just such a gift that I'm I will treasure the rest of, in some ways, I will treasure for the rest of my life the memories of this FTD journey, because it revealed the depth of love that my husband has for me. And I want to have that for him as well. And to just know that neither of us is going anywhere. You know, if we've gotten through this, you know, we can
you can get through anything.
So I'm very,
Aw.
very thankful for the gift of his understanding, and the gift that he gave me in allowing me to seek help when, you know, the panic attacks and the anxiety and the depression just started to drown me. I'm very thankful that he was an advocate for me when I wasn't able to be an advocate for myself. Much like
I'm
I
really
have tried to be
thankful
for my
that my
dad.
camera is not working because I am ugly crying. Okay, so
Aw.
thank God my camera is not working.
It's, I'm so happy
That's
for
really
you.
sweet.
Yes, I'm so happy for you that you have that, and I feel thankful as well. And
And I
you
know
took
not
the words
everybody
out.
does, and it's
Yeah,
heartbreak. That's a whole nother layer of heartbreaking that sometimes comes into FTD stories. But I am thankful that I have been spared that
yeah, it'll
aspect.
make or break you, make or break
Yes,
your
100%.
relationship. And I feel, yeah, you said it so beautifully, and I'm going to take some of the things you said and I'm going to say them to my husband. I'm going to tell him how much. I mean, I try, but truly.
I mean, I knew I loved that man, but you know, you have something like that happen, something like this happen in your family, and I think the Lord has really graced my husband with a level of compassion and calmness, especially calmness under pressure, and loyalty that, you know, you just don't find everywhere. And I'm thankful that he's just been a guiding light for me in this whole
Good.
FTD journey.
That's so
anyway,
sweet.
can stop waxing eloquent, being sappy, but had to get my sappy shout out to my husband in there.
Oh my God,
That's
of course.
right.
We're keeping that in there. Shout out to hubby.
He'll be so uncomfortable. He's gonna listen to this episode and be like, "Why did you talk about me?"
Well,
really
I do
sweet.
want to thank you. I want to thank you for, I think it's great that, great shout out to your husband. I'm excited for him. And I'm so happy for you. I also just want to thank you for being so open about going to counseling. There are several people who have done that in our episodes, and it literally warms my heart. And I know Rachel agrees with me on this as a therapist. But there's just such a stigma still. And the fact that people are openly sharing that they're going to therapy, I know that's going to help someone. I know that it is. I know that someone's going to listen to this who's in the same boat as us and say, okay, it's helped other people. Maybe it's, and they're open and they're honest about it. I'm going to go do it. And so that's a very powerful thing for you to share. And also maybe there'll be a husband listening that's like, I got to support my wife going to that therapy. So I just want to thank you for sharing that, because I think every time that comes up in an episode, it just,
I just
it's
needed
just
to
so
be
important.
told, you're not a failure. You're not, you know, you're not a mess.
No,
Like, you are a mess, but
no,
you know, you need help, and
no,
that's okay. It's really
no,
okay.
no, it is. That's a sign of strength, honestly. I think it is to raise your hand and say, I need a little help. I think it's so healthy. It's changed my life. I think it's an amazing tool.
Let's talk a little bit about Mark before FTD. So I know you mentioned he was in the ministry.
He talks about himself like a farm boy from Alabama that God kind of just pulled out of the wreck that he was making of his life and turned him around and blessed him and enabled him, you know, not only to build a wonderful life for himself and his family, but also to do the same for others. And the way that God started that process, I think Dad was able to go to Christian high school, which allowed him to go then to Christian college, where he studied theology and was able to pursue really what became his dream at the age of 16, which was helping other people who were troubled, other people who had heavy burdens, heavy weights on them, to turn that around and be able to bless other people and be successful in life. That was really what he wanted. And he still talks very fondly about his days at Christian college, where he met and married my mom, and and that's where, after they got married, they moved to Indiana, which is where I was born and where my family is from now.
Tell us what he was like as a dad.
Oh, this part always gets me.
Rachel can't with the daughters of the fathers with
Yeah, with the daughter dad duo, I
I know
just
it's
break my heart.
Oh, he never complained. He and my mom never fought in front of us. They were always very careful. Whenever they had a disagreement, they went into another room. I never heard him yell, not once. He was kind. He wanted to involve us in everything he was doing. He would take me with him when he went on visitations, to the hospital,
yeah.
to the hospital, to funerals, to shut-ins, whatever he was doing. If he was able to involve us kids, he did. And I grew up, basically split between living at home and living at the church because it was just so fun. He always let us, play in his office and pull his books all off the shelves. And I think I had talked to you guys before about how he taught me to wash a car, and I'm sure he could have washed the car way faster and way easier without little kids around and having to go behind us and redo everything. But that's just the kind of dad he was. He was happy to involve us, to get down on the floor, get his hands dirty, so to speak, as a dad. He didn't leave my mom to do all the parenting and think, oh, the kids are her responsibility. No, he was very involved, and he was very much kind and compassionate, and he was a real teacher. I think he really delighted in being able to teach other people what had been helpful for him. And he did that for us, whether it was, when I'd had a hard interaction with a friend or, whatever. He just always seemed to know what to say, and to, even if it was just, giving me a hug and telling me it's going to be okay. He just, I wish I remembered him better. You asked me that question of what was he like, and I wish I knew better, because I think by the time I was a teenager, this decline had kind of already started. And so all I really have are these vague impressions, these vague kind of colors or pictures in my mind. I remember the smell of the pancakes when he used to make pancakes for us. Or I remember as a little girl when we would have, I grew up around Purdue, and my parents were really involved with our church's ministry to Purdue students. So we always had Purdue students at our house growing up. And I remember knowing that my bedtime was coming, that I was going to have to go to bed while all the college students were still there. But my dad, before I would go to bed, my mom would let me sit on his lap for a little bit while he talked to the college kids. My dad would pick me up and set me on his lap, and I'd lay my head against his chest, and I loved just hearing his heartbeat and hearing the sound of his voice in his chest while he was talking to these college students about, whatever. I don't even remember what it was about, but if I would fall asleep, or rather pretend to fall asleep on his lap, and my mom would come back to get me to put me to bed, he'd be like, she's okay. And he would let me stay on his lap longer. And I can't tell you the number of times that I pretended to fall asleep on his lap so that I could stay up and just listen to him talk and listen to him, sharing the beautiful truths of scripture that he loved with other people. That was just such a gift for me. And that is one thing that I don't remember much, but I do remember his kindness and his involvement and just the warmth that I felt when he was around.
One thing that's really come out of these interviews is when we're talking about our parents is like, we remember those small things, like pancakes on Saturday or Sunday, or like being up against like our dad's chest and hearing, I'm crying now, sorry, hearing his heartbeat. And it just, we're all three mamas here. I think we get so hard on ourselves about what we're doing for our kids, and if we're doing enough and going on enough vacations and putting them in the right programs and all these things. But like, what are the things that we are remembering about our parents? It's just the love.
Moments.
It's the love and the little moments that are so, so important. And
thank you for sharing that, because I think it's a beautiful image of who your dad truly is, but it's also just such a good reminder of like what is truly important as a parent. So thank you, and sorry for my little crying tangent.
It's okay. One of my husband and I's favorite music artists, JJ Heller, she has a song called Big Love, Small Moments. And I feel like if I could sum up my dad in a song, the dad that I remember from when I was a kid, that would be how I would describe him. Big love, small moments.
It's so
Are you
sweet.
okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks for checking on me.
Sorry, Rachel.
No,
I know
it's
it's your
okay.
dad too.
I'm like the most emotional when it comes to my dad and my kids, like just the tears flow like Hallmark movies. I mean, my kids will like wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh my God, look how cute they are. Like with their
I know.
messy hair. Like it's just, anyway, before we get into the letter, can you just tell the listeners, where is he in the disease now? Is he still able to communicate with you?
Yeah, so because he has the behavioral variant, he still maintains a lot of his language control. He's still very much able to communicate his opinions, let me tell you. But he doesn't understand why he has to be in memory care. So every phone call I have with him is gut-wrenching all over again. I have to work really hard to like prepare my mind every time I call him or every time I answer the phone. So he's still, I would say, probably moderate stages, still able to communicate his thoughts, but the emotional immaturity and the lack of judgment, just when you first talk to him, he sounds fairly normal. And then the longer you talk to him, the more he starts to repeat himself, the more he starts to show that that there's a cognitive problem.
Now that he's settled in his facility and you're taking time to process and grieve and focus on yourself, how do you feel?
I no longer have a constant pressure in my chest. I no longer wake up in the middle of the night wondering where he is, or wondering if he's hurt, or wondering if I need to call another ambulance. I've had to do that before. If I'm being completely honest, I am still wrestling through my anxiety and my panic attacks. I'm working really closely with my counselor still, but I feel like I can do this now. It's going to be okay. At the beginning, I was hiding a lot of my anxiety and my panic from my husband and from my circle of friends. I wasn't really telling people much. Now that I have opened up, now that I have admitted that I need help, and also now that I'm not, constantly worried about my dad's safety and the safety of others, I'm able to focus a lot more on my children. I'm able to keep up with household tasks and not have, the depression and the anxiety cripple me to the point where I am scared to get out of bed in the morning. I wake up with hope. And for a while, I did not wake up with hope. So, sorry, I keep crying. I'm not really a
Oh my
big
God,
crier,
don't
you
say
guys.
sorry. Don't.
Oh, I'm
I
a
am.
huge crier, so imagine.
I hate crying in front of other people, and here I am.
My face is bright red, my eyes are glossy. Okay, so to wrap up, your dad, your family is so fortunate to have somebody like you push for what your dad deserves and what he needs. And for you to sit with Maria and I and just discuss it so openly is really brave. And I
Yes.
really hope that you can look back on it and feel more hope and more of the light.
That's very sweet. I have had such a team. It has really taken a village to get to this
Yeah.
point. It took my mom being brave enough to admit the abuse to our pastors and to the authorities. It took my aunt being brave enough to reach out to my brother when that trip happened. It took my brother being brave, staying in contact with my dad when things were just so bad. And then it's taken the bravery of my husband as well to let me put really our life on hold in order to care for dad. And, Caleb has helped a lot with that as well, my oldest brother. So yeah, like I said, I wish I could take credit, but it has really been God has protected us. I'm just very grateful.
So if your dad was here and said, I want to be remembered this way, how would he describe himself?
In the book of John in the Bible, it talks about Jesus being the good shepherd, and how pastors are supposed to be like Jesus in that way. They're supposed to shepherd, they're supposed to protect, care for those who are in their flock, in their care. And I feel like that describes my dad. For many, many years of his ministry, he loved and was loved by many, many people. But I think in his right mind, he would want to be remembered for the good parts of how he was as a father and a husband. And I think he would be really proud of the resilience and the way we tried, very clumsily at times, but still tried to love him and to love each other as a family through something as heavy and hard as an FTD diagnosis.
That's really
Beautiful.
sweet. Oh, Dad. Let's hear something that your dad wrote.
I found a letter that he wrote to me on my 15th birthday. He had to be out of the country. I think it was Moldova or Romania, somewhere in Eastern Europe, for a counseling training conference where he was going to train other counselors. And being the typical 15-year-old girl, I was very much overly sad and emotional about, him being gone on this, momentous milestone birthday. I don't know, looking back, why I thought 15 was this, amazing milestone, but I did. And I was really upset that he was going to be gone for it. But he left me this letter from my mom to give to me on my birthday. Keri, I can't believe you are 15 years old today, but it's true. I want you to know that you have been a joy and a delight to my heart since the day you were born. It really seems like yesterday that my little girl was running to the door to greet her daddy and would jump into my arms. God has blessed you and shown you a wonderful amount of grace and mercy. It is a joy, as your dad, to know that you love the Lord and want to serve him. I love to hear you play the piano. You are so gifted in music, and your heart comes out in your music when you play. My princess, today is another step in your walk with the Lord. I want you to be able to look back on your life and say with Paul, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. I love you so very much, Dad.
So lucky I am.
Thank you to Keri for bravely sharing her story with us this week. We are so proud to just have this beautiful community, and I love that we just support each other and are doing everything we can to fight this disease. This podcast is produced by Maria Kent Beers and Rachel Martinez, and the beautiful music you hear is by Bailey Kent.